This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. So, somebody I respect who has passed along good insights to me in email before. We've never met, but he sent me a long email the other day after my Gerald Celente podcast. If you've not listened to my Gerald Celente podcast, even if you have heard of Gerald, have an opinion of Gerald, listen to my 30 minutes of Gerald. So this reader writes me and he says, quote, "So I listened to Gerald Celente's podcast interview, during which there was a segment in which he almost went off the cliff in anger and disgust at the geopolitical, economic, and social state of affairs we witness in today's world. Lack of passionate viewpoint is not something he can be accused of. You were particularly quiet yourself," he's talking about me, "at that point, graciously affording him the space to articulate in full where he was coming from. I'm curious what reactions you might have received from listeners. Thing is, how he was feeling, what he shares resonates. If one is of the glass half full tribe, as I wish to be, maybe even harboring affinity for Kurzweil's singularity moment of arrival, we're also on the cusp of some remarkable innovations and exciting times. There's a silver lining on the horizon. Yet something is awry. It feels as if we're just spinning our wheels like a hamster. Lots of activity, but no real progress. We read familiar sources," he's talking to me, "Tom Friedman, Seth Godin, Nassim Taleb, Neil Ferguson, Rolf DeBelli, Alan Watts, Michael Mauboussin, Barry Ritholtz, James Altucher, Gerald Celente, to name a few. Regrettably, that's where the similarities end. You live a different life." Once again, he's talking about me. "You experience the daily world in ways I can only imagine. When you're in a position to really write your own ticket in today's world, all chaos aside, that's truly remarkable, as your own experience attests. Yet, the brutal reality is, in my humble opinion, not everyone can do so. There's just not enough, quote, categories of one, end quote, to go around. Really, and I cringe saying that as it smacks of scarcity thinking. But there, I've said it, end quote. And I responded to my blog, I said, look, there's no shortcut, but what is the alternative to not trying? Another guy comes on and he says, I admire Covel's comment following this spike of passion. My comment of, there's no shortcut, but what is the alternative to not trying? He says, I admire Covel's comment following this spike of passion. What he said was perfect. I believe it was something to the effect of, when you hear that much passion in someone, there's oftentimes great truth behind it. Now I responded, there's a thin line here. Giving up is pretty close. I don't accept that. And I don't accept it. Because it's not a matter of sitting out there and saying to yourself, I must be the next Bill Dunn. I must be the next David Harding. Many, 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 many things went into place for David Harding to be running a $24 billion hedge fund. And there is what, 7.5 billion people on this planet? How many of them are running a $24 billion hedge fund? I mean, if you are seriously waking up each day and saying, my goal is to be the next David Harding, I want to run a $24 billion hedge fund, maybe you are nuts. Probably not going to happen. In fact, not going to happen. That's not the point. The point, at least from my world and what I do in my world and helping people to learn trend following, is to give you an above average chance, a better than average chance to make money on your account. You can't sit around and compare yourself to T. Boone Pickens or Salem Abraham or John W. Henry all day long. What good is that? You can't compare yourself to billionaires. You can shoot for it, you can strive for it, but you could blow a life and never get there. That's just the pure odds of it all. And I'm going to play a clip from Nassim Taleb in a few minutes, and he goes right into that area as well. So I just want to leave this podcast off with some hope and some inspiration that it's not about becoming the next Seth Godin. It's not about becoming the next Barry Ritholtz, or if somebody is nice enough to compliment me, or becoming the next Michael Covel. It's about becoming the next you, your situation, not sitting there all day long staring at a screen. And I'm not saying this friend of mine was doing this. I don't think he was, but in many ways, his writing can be interpreted that way. Staring at a screen and looking at other people and their actions and saying, I must live up to, I must mimic that, I must do as much as that. No. The idea is to be above average and do the best for your life, your situation. That's what you want. That's the objective. Now, as I kind of lay that out, I have one other odd thing I want to mention. This has absolutely nothing to do with this podcast, but maybe it has something to do with the news. And Rolf DeBelli talked about this. I caught this headline the other day. It also talks about lightning striking too and the odds of this happening. There's just a lot of things that go on with this little story that I read. So some lady took her baby to a zoo in China. I guess there was wild monkeys or something. And the monkey came up while she was changing the 7-month-old's baby's diaper, and the monkey bit one of the testicles off. That's probably, hands down, one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard. The child is fine now. They fixed the child. It's missing a testicle. The monkey ate it. Yes, I want to laugh. It's not funny, but it's crazy. So as I lay out a monkey eating a baby's testicle story off, I think that leads in perfectly to this comment from the President of the United States of America. And I believe this was in August. And I guess, and this comes courtesy of Tim Price, who I'm trying to get on the podcast too, but Tim needs to get Skype in his office. We were having a little round about that. So Tim, get Skype in your office. Anyways, but I caught this newsletter that Tim had out there, and he had this quote. Yes, once again, I am going straight from the monkey eating the baby's testicle to this quote from the President of the United States of America. And here's the quote, August 2013, quote, "We have to turn the page on the bubble and bust mentality that created this mess," end quote. And as Tim says, Obama claims he wants to turn the page on the bubble and bust, but appears unable to understand that the very institution of the Federal Reserve is the one most responsible for the bubbles and the bust. Well, that's a true statement. The Fed is the boom bust maestro. The Fed creates all this, and it keeps people in suspended animation. It keeps them attached to the matrix, waiting for daddy to tuck them in. I won't go there again with Bernanke giving people a kiss on the lips as he tucks them in at night. But everyone, that people want this. And I've seen this debate on my website. Somebody sent in a link to this video from this economist, Jeffrey Sachs, and this very ivory tower, nice blue blazer, talking at the London School of Economics, all this nice frivolly talk about how he imagines the world being socially engineered under the auspices of further and further government to fix it all. So while government, and by the way, so where in Tim's newsletter, he said that Obama claims to want to turn the page, but unable to understand. Oh, Obama understands. And I'm going to get a little harsh here on the current president of the United States, because I've avoided getting harsh for a long time, because he understands. So when the president says we have to turn the page on the bubble and bust mentality that created this mess, he knows damn well how the mess was created. So when he says we have to turn the page, well, he's not telling the full truth. He's not telling the full story at all. I want to play a little excerpt from Chris Penn in a very famous scene, which gets at my emotion when I read that comment from President Obama.
All right, let me just say this out loud, because I want to get this straight in my head. You're saying that Mr. Blonde was going to kill you, and then when we got back, he was going to kill us, take the satchel of diamonds and scram. I'm right about that, right? That's correct. That's your story?
I swear on my mother's eternal soul, it's what happened.
The man you just killed just got released from prison. He got caught at a company warehouse full of hot items. He could have fucking walked. All he had to do was say my dad's name, but he didn't. He kept his fucking mouth shut. And he did his fucking time, and he did it like a man. He did 4 years for us. So, Mr. Orange, you're telling me that this very good friend of mine, who did 4 years for my father, who in 4 years never made a deal no matter what they dangled in front of him, you're telling me that now that this man is free, and we're making good on our commitment to him, he's just gonna decide, out of the fucking blue, to rip us off? Why don't you tell me what really happened?
I love that. Why don't you tell me what really happened? Because everyone's afraid to say that. Everyone's afraid to call out the current president of the United States. And I don't need to apologize for the past president of the United States anymore, but everyone is afraid to call out the current president of the United States right now and say, you are full of it. You know damn well how these bubbles have been created. You know how they are continuing to be created. No one calls them out. Except, I did see the other day a call out. A very staunch liberal, who I respect because he's got some very strong opinions. Ed Asner came out and he said, and I think we're to the point now in America where we can finally admit this, but Asner said, nobody will come out and criticize President Obama. And he was talking about Hollywood because he is black. And that is true. That is 100% true. But I think while America loves to have its race battles, it loves to have this constant battle of this guy's white, this guy's black, and all this other nonsense that never ends. Never ends. And the provocateurs are out there all day long pushing the quote white agenda or the quote black agenda. And most people are just like, I don't care. Black or white, I don't care. But Asner's right. People have been afraid to criticize because they'd be like, ooh, you're a racist. You can't say that about the president. You can't say something critical of it. If the president comes out and he says he wants to, we have to turn the page on the bubble and bust mentality that created this mess, and everyone knows he's full of it. Everyone knows he knows exactly how the mess was created, and he's a part of it, a part of the ongoing mess. People are afraid to say, hey, this is wrong. You can't blame the last 3 presidents anymore. Now, I want to play another quick excerpt about the truth. Because this is the truth, what I'm saying right now. You can disagree with me, but you know damn well it's the truth. This is an excerpt from Penn and Teller fame about the truth.
The difference between telling the truth as you see it from your heart with passion and trying to win people over is, I guess the technical term would be an RCH, just the slightest possible difference. But to me, it's very important, and I try to stick with that.
And it is a fine line, as he talks about the truth. It is a fine line. But I'm not doing this. I don't do my podcast. I do it, frankly, for myself. Yes, I want you, the audience. I want you to follow along with me. I want you to go down the path with me. Because I know you see these things too. And I'm sure somebody out there will listen to this podcast and be like, my gosh, this guy, Mike Covel, he's written some trend following books and he just made a very provocative statement that nobody will criticize the president of the United States of America because he's black. Well, that's dangerous talk. That's alarming. He's out on a ledge. He's on an edge. He's going to fall over. Hey, guess what, man? I've got enough oxygen to breathe over here. Breathe over here, and I mean where I sit, wherever I sit on this planet. I don't need the system to anoint me, and I don't need the system to say, hey, Mike, here you go, little pat on the head. Now you go over here and you tell everybody what we want you to tell them, even if it's just BS read off a teleprompter. Now, before I go off on too much of a tangent, Tim Price, in his newsletter where I got that Obama quote, he has another excerpt from an analyst. And I want to read this really quick because it kind of addresses, what does address, Obama's disingenuous baloney that he put out on his radio show. Quote, as an analyst of bubbles, I readily admit it is impossible to accurately predict the timing of their demise. Even in hindsight, I have no idea why technology stocks put in bubble highs in March of 2000. It's not clear why stocks peaked again when they did in 2007. It's never been clear to me why the U.S. equities bubble cracked when it did in late 1929, that is. But all those major tops were put in after speculative market melt-ups pushed the divergence between inflated securities, price bubbles, and deteriorating fundamentals to precarious extremes. And all three speculative melt-ups were fueled in part by powerful short squeezes. Squeezes made possible by traders shorting securities in response to deteriorating fundamental backdrops. A similar environment exists for a major top in 2013. Well, of course, you can readily look at the current environment and say, well, sure, maybe there's a major top here. Am I betting on that? Are trend following traders betting on that? No. You put your trades on, you follow your system. Now, from a big macro standpoint, can we easily look at the last 20 years and say, so yes, when the Fed gears these boom and bust periods up, the ones that Obama says he really doesn't know anything about, you can get these huge meltdowns. We've had two 50% drawdowns in the S&P in the last 13 years. There will be another. And I saw some guy on YouTube was calling me a doomsdayer for saying that. I'm not telling you when it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we know it will happen. There will be another meltdown. Because if there's not another meltdown, well, I mean, that is just complete trust in a system that is so rigged right now. We know the system is rigged right now with zero interest rate policy. So at some point in time, there'll be a meltdown. And in the quote that I just read from Tim Price's newsletter points out, hey, I don't know when. And when you don't know when, as I bring this back to trend following, when you don't know when, you need a plan. You need a plan of attack. You need a strategy. And that strategy has to excel when things are getting a little raw, when things are getting a little dicey, when things are a little on the edge, and you're feeling a little in that inner belly, that kind of anxiety feeling where you can't sleep. You want a strategy that actually starts to zoom up and get better when things get a little dicey. And for those of you who might already realize where I'm going, I want to play a clip from Nassim Taleb. Talib? I'm not sure. I've heard it pronounced multiple different ways, so all apologies if I'm screwing up. People screw my name up too. My last name is spelled Covel, C-O-V-E-L. It's pronounced Covel. I've heard people say Covel and stuff like that, but it's shortened from Kavialowskis to Kavaleski to Covel. So to Mr. Taleb, gosh, I hope I'm not screwing this up. I want to play this clip from a Reason TV interview with Nick Gillespie. And I think this is fantastic because it goes right at this idea of having a strategy that excels when chaos starts to happen. As he calls it, anti-fragility.
Let's talk about anti-fragility. What is anti-fragility as you discuss it in the book, and why is it so important?
Okay, first I need to tell you what fragility is.
Okay.
Once you map fragility as what does not like volatility, then you can realize that the opposite would be something that likes volatility and likes variation, likes turmoil, likes stress up to a point. And the opposite would be robust. Robust is like a rock, doesn't care. Diamond is robust, perfectly robust. What is anti-fragile gains from disorder and effectively may even need disorder for fuel. So here you have three categories for objects. The fragile doesn't like volatility. The robust doesn't care. The resilient, the adaptable, really doesn't improve from stress.
And you talk about it in terms of materials. That a robust thing, you mentioned a rock or a diamond. It's just there. It doesn't gain, but it can shatter from being kind of
up to a point.
Up.
You're always robust or fragile, anti-fragile up to a point.
Right, but then for anti-fragility and fragility applies more to kind of systems or human living organisms.
Exactly. What people fail to understand, and this is where libertarians tend to pick it up rather quickly, is that even when you read Adam Smith, you have this illusion that the economy functions like a machine. Mm-hmm. It's not like a washing machine. A washing machine needs maintenance. It's more like a cat than a washing machine. So like the human body needs some stressors, and everything organic and complex communicates with the environment via stressors.
Mm-hmm. So give when you say the economy is not like a washing machine, it's more like a cat. I mean, that's basically, it's an organic whole, or an organic isn't the right word, but it's a complex system.
I call it organic-like complex system, yes.
Okay, and then is it true, though, that in a complex system like that, then is every element of it, is it kind of a fractal system where then each actor, each atom has to be...
It's exactly fractal in the sense that you have layers, just like the restaurant business, okay, is composed of restaurants, you see, and for the restaurant business to be robust, at least robust, or perhaps anti-fragile, you need every single restaurant to be fragile.
Right.
You see, so it's the opposite of Nietzsche. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. I make claims. What kills me makes others stronger.
That's right. Because
they learn from your mistakes.
That's right.
And you have evolutionary forces where the individual sacrifice for the collective, and it works within your biological system, even at the cellular level. You're composed of cells. If you harm some cells, you see, your overall health will improve.
Now this, talk a little bit more about that, because most people would say, okay, when you have a system and if there's a contagion in it, if there's a cancer in it, if there's some kind of stressor that starts taking over, it's going to spread to the whole system. And isn't this what we hear in the banking, in the financial crisis, that, there's a contagion and it spreads out? You're arguing that actually a robust or an anti-fragile system is capable of seeing this part of the system being cancered and learning from it.
Exactly. Cite the great Yogi Berra.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
A good anti-fragile system is a system in which all mistakes are good mistakes.
Right.
You see, and a bad system is one in which, to paraphrase Yogi Berra, you tend to make the wrong mistakes.
Right.
So let's compare the banking system to, say, transportation. All right, every plane crash makes the next plane crash less likely, and our transportation safer. Now with the banking system, it's because of, you may blame it on government. I do blame it on government, but it could be something else.
Mm-hmm. Wait, did you say you do blame it on government?
I do sort of blame it on large government. Means large banks too big to fail.
But I mean, so
the failure of a bank leads to an increased probability of failure of the entire system, and that's a bad system.
How, just with the banking system, what's the best way to stop that so that you're not allowing the problem to replicate?
Okay, I have the way I present things is overall. I say what fragilizes an overall system. What did that fragilize the overall system? The three things. Number one, centralization. Decentralization spreads mistakes, makes smaller mistakes, like Switzerland, perfectly decentralized, and smack in the middle of Europe. So decentralization, which is where we converge with libertarians. Right. A second one is low debt, because we've discovered since the Babylonians that debt has systemic consequences, whereas equity, doesn't have the same.
Well, wait. Now talk about this, because I happen to agree with you that large debt, and we're at what 100% of the American economy. But I'm just saying. But just today or yesterday, Paul Krugman, one of your great friends and nemesis, right? But he was writing about these $1 trillion deficits. They don't matter. Debt, large amounts of debt. So why does debt make things more fragile?
Let me talk from risk-based system.
Sure.
All these economists, they're not let's put it this way: the risk is not their thing. All right. So so the second idea is debt, and the third one I will say is skin in the game. So let's talk about debt. Debt leads to fragility, because let's say that you have two brothers. One of them borrowed, and they both have provisions about the future, forecasts, predictions about the future. His one brother borrows, the other issues equity. The one who borrows will go bust if he makes a mistake. The one who issued equity will fluctuate, but will be able to survive forecast error.
That is the type of thinking that you need to have. That is when these bubbles are occurring, when these bubbles are popping, you need the strategy that gets better, that gets stronger, even more prosperous. That's the goal. See, we can have these big macro debates that never end, and I'm not trying to do that. I get bored, frankly, of them. I don't want to have big macro debates that never end. Well, I think this is going to happen. I think that's going to happen. I do think it's terrible, and I think it's a mental disease for those of you out there that really see government as the solution. For those of you that see government as the solution, I think it's a mental disease. And, I don't know if I've ever said this in my podcast, but years ago, I had a chance to intern at a major federal agency back, I think it was late teens or maybe first 21 or something, and 20 years old. And I did it for a summer. It was the most disgusting thing you've ever seen. It was out of shape people doing nothing, sitting around cubes, office cubes that is, waiting to collect paychecks. It's the biggest racket you've ever seen. And I got to tell you, if the rest of America understood how much wealth was rolling around the Washington, D.C. area, I think they would come down there with pitchforks. I mean, it's absolutely nuts the amount of wealth that's rolling around there, because it's two income houses, each of them earning over $100,000. They got pensions that never end. The amount of wealth that's there is just astronomical. But hey, look, like I said, big macro debates are not my thing. I bring up the debate, I bring up the macro idea of bubbles because that's the world we live in. And if we know it's the world we live in, what kind of strategy makes sense in a world that's dominated by moves up and down? Trend following makes a hell of a lot of sense. Hell of a lot of sense. So while trend following makes a lot of sense, I'm not saying it's easy. But like that original paragraph I read from the guy that wrote me in saying, hey, it's hard to be another one of these types of people. The idea of bubbles, you can't predict those either. You can't predict anything. You can't predict whether you're going to be the next name person. You can't predict the next bubble. That's not the point. And I want to end with this little clip from The Sopranos. Junior offering Tony some advice, which I think is right there in the trend following headspace.
What's the fucking answer?
Who says there is one? That's what being a boss is. You steer the ship the best way you know. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes you hit the rocks. In the meantime, you find your pleasures where you can.
Sometimes it's smooth and sometimes it hits the rocks. See, we've created a society where there's this illusion that it's always smooth. It's not always smooth. It's never smooth. It's an illusion. It's not what you're shooting for. You're not shooting for smooth. Volatility. Volatility is what gets you rich. Rich personally, rich economically. Volatility is it. Not this smooth illusion. And back to the bubble talk again. That's what we're in the middle of right now. The Fed creates smooth illusions. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe our current president. Because once you come out there and you pretend like you don't know how the bubbles actually happen, why should I believe the next thing you say? That's just boiler talk for the masses. Just to put the spin out there. It's exactly opposite to the clip that I played from Penn, of Penn and Teller fame. Not that first clip from Christopher Penn, bless his eternal soul, for that was one fantastic clip. Now, why don't you tell me what really happened? And telling you what really happened is what makes me wake up every day. It makes me wake up and do these podcasts. I like getting at what really happened. Even if some people turn me off, curse me out, or say I'm crazy. Guess what? I've got enough oxygen in the tank. Unless you put 30-odd 6 to my head, I'm still going to be here. Not going away anytime soon. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.